What's up, guys? This is Phil from Game Premier Insights, and I'm here starting our new series on EU LCS and esports in general. This will probably be a solo series for the most part, but I'm here for the first episode with none other than Mr. Philip Lohman.
Hello.
And we'll be going through the changes, the moving and shaking of the EU LCS a week before it starts, and we'll come to you with our own predictions and thoughts on said moves and the season overall. So let's start with the obvious big change. We've got a team that's come in and a team that's gone out, obviously. The relegation, if people didn't know from relegations, the MYM Meet Your Makers were relegated, formerly Super Hot Crew. They're gone, they're finished. Well, they're not in the EU LCS this season. And
Will they be in the Challenger LCS?
They'll be in Challenger Series, yes.
Okay.
And then the other two teams, Giants and Roccat, who are in relegation, both beat their respective opponents, so they'll still be in. But they were replaced by Oregon, which is a bit of a crazy one because, I mean, this team that's come in and replaced MYM are definitely not a challenger team. Like, you look at their lineup and it's definitely not challenger. They've got the likes of, they've got ex-Peke's their mid laner and they're like their star player, their key focal point. They've got Saz in the top lane. They've got Miffy as support, he was a really strong support. I think he played for NIP, but then he got banned for a year.
Okay.
And they've got a really strong team. I don't know too much about their other players. I think they've got Amazing in the jungler, who used to play for Copenhagen Wolves, who was quite a good jungler. Didn't he have a stint at TSM as well?
Stint with
So you've got this like talent smattered out for your squad, and you've come up and say they're like the 10th team, as it were.
Yeah.
And you've got to think like the overall quality of the EU LCS has gone up so much for them replacing MYM.
Yeah.
So, like, what do we think of this? Do we think this team's going to come in and just, like, steamroll the league?
I think especially with teams like this, certainly there's a lot of potential. I think, however, a lot of the time there can be sort of problems when people try to put together a super team. So I think if we look back to Team Alternate, who were kind of a similar idea in that maybe not quite the same in that all their players were sort of very high ranking solo queue players.
Yeah.
Alternate, when they came in, did very well to start off with, but then they sort of tailed off towards the end of the season. People sort of figured out their play style, figured out how to deal with them, and unlike Cloud9, who obviously sort of came up through the Challenger Series and weren't sort of maybe the superstars.
Yeah, they were just a good team.
Yeah, they were just a good team, and I think that's more of a recipe of success than sort of putting 5 highly successful solo queue players in a team.
The thing is, this team Oregon this isn't their first game. They played in Challenger this season. I think they went undefeated or almost undefeated. Yeah. And they steamrolled it. So are they going to do the same? Are they going to carry that momentum up into the EU LCS?
Well, certainly you've got, I think, because the difference between them and obviously Team Alternate is, like you said, they've played for a season together already. They've done incredibly well. They've all got experience. Well, most of them have experience
in the LCS.
Playing Fives LCS. Soaz and
ex-Peke
obviously.
Fnatic, obviously. Miffy was at NIP, obviously got Amazing with Copenhagen Wolves and TSM. They've got high level experience with high level teams.
And they've got good. Some of them have got good previous experience together. Certainly, they'll all have played against each other, so they'll know their individual play styles quite well.
Yeah, I can see him going far in this league.
Certainly.
But obviously, I don't want to rule out the other teams before we talk about them, and I don't want to ask you for your prediction before we talk about the other teams. So let's start with like the big, what we consider the big teams are in this league. Maybe not the highest performing, but the big ones. And so let's start with Elements. That they've had a big turnover in player base. Yep. They've had first of all the big thing. They released Reckless, who that was the big move of the summer and before the first split. Is that Reckless left Fnatic due to, I don't know the proper reasons. He had maybe a fallout with the team. And he went to join Elements, and Elements flopped completely. They didn't play well at all. They would make changes at least once to the lineup with Crepo coming in for them at one stage, and they only just avoided the relegation playoffs. And now Reckless is gone. He's gone back to Fnatic. We'll talk about that later. We've got Wicked and Shook just being released, just flat out. They're not in the team anymore. The only person they've maintained. If you look to their team at the beginning of the spring split versus their team now, it's completely different except for Throbbing.
Yeah.
That can't be healthy for the team.
No, I think Elements are I think there was certainly a lot of expectation on them when Evil Geniuses, when they had the split between NA and EU, and so Crepo and Snoopy went to NA and everyone else stayed in EU. I think when they had that split, obviously they had a lot of reputation. They'd been a highly successful team before that, back in the CLG EU days, doing really well at Worlds, stuff like that. There was a lot of expectation on that team, and so I think that was a lot to live up to, and I think when you sort of carve up a team like that can cause some real problems, and I think we're seeing that now with Wicked and Shook being released, and sort of Froggen being the only player from that original CLG
who's in this
EU
team
lineup still remaining in the team. And I think when you carve up a team like that and you try to constantly bolster it by bringing in what is, in your view, a better player for a player who's been underperforming, I think that damages a team, because the more you bring in new players, the more you remove that old sort of
the consistency and the chemistry. Because it's not about just occasionally having the best parts, having the best parts that fit together well.
Yeah.
And obviously, I mean, you've got JWoww, who's their top laner now, who showed relative consistency. He's played for Elements already this season. He replaced Wicked towards the end.
Yeah.
And you can see he's a good player. And like having a player maybe face against some players over time, like there are a couple of players, JWoww certainly has already been part of this Elements team before Wicked was released, and now he's gone up to starting role. So some of these players, some of them have played together before, but some of them you've got to question like if they will meld with this team. And then we're going to see Elements. It's a kill or cure really at this stage. It's got to be like either they put together a team that's really good and they're going to skyrocket from where they were, or I could see them like having another really rough, struggling season.
Yeah, I think in the last few seasons of League of Legends as an esport of sort of the professionals, so LCS in the EU and NA, we've seen a big increase in the number of teams who are changing what had been a really consistent 5-man lineup. So, for example, Gambit Gaming used to be Moscow 5, who always had that lineup of Genja, Darian, Gosu, Alexich, and
fifth.
Someone else.
Where would that position be? Cabochard? No. Diamond Prox.
Diamond Prox, right, yeah. Diamond. So they had that 5-man lineup for ages and ages and ages. Yeah. They were very successful with it. Then things start to chop and change. People leave. Alexich, I remember feeling sort of quite sad for Gambit Gaming when Alexich did leave, because I felt like that was, and I think everyone recognised that was really the end of an era for them. But I think we've seen a big increase in a lot of teams who have been together for a long time as one unit, and this happened in NA as well. People like CLG, TSM, a lot of changing, a lot of people retiring, but a big diversion from sort of having a continuous 5-man lineup who sort of went through the ups and downs together, to just sort of, someone has a bad couple of weeks, and suddenly everyone's thinking, are they going to get dropped? Are they going to get replaced?
I think is it a change in the game in like the esports scene? Because before it was like, X player has been playing badly, but don't worry, he'll get through the slump and he'll get better.
Yeah.
But now X player has 3 bad weeks and suddenly he's benched.
Yeah.
And if you're a good player who gets benched, there's not much coming back for that, is there?
No, I think definitely it's become a lot more cutthroat. And I think that has a negative effect on the players, because not only are you then increasing the amount of pressure that it has on a player, because they're constantly thinking 3 bad weeks. They're thinking, okay, like now I have to perform,
or I'm out,
and then sort of every week becomes like a world's qualifying or a relegation battle, and that's going to affect.
And that pressure can be good for players. You can see players really thrive under that pressure, but a lot of players don't. They'll just crack.
Yeah, and especially when it's sort of sustained, because I think it takes. The problem is that one good performance can't just get you out of the slump, because I think it's a lot harder to get positive, to get out than to get in.
Speaking of slumps and teams that are really under pressure, I think Roccat maybe are the team that are most under pressure at the moment. They were billed at the beginning of the spring split as being the team that were going to steamroll this league. They were a big team. Everyone said they won the off season. They had the best squad, and then they came into it. And after the first couple of weeks, they bombed completely. And the fact that they were in relegation, they 3-0'd their relegation opponents' Copenhagen Wolves Academy. They 3-0'd them in easy games. But the reaction of the players, you could see, there wasn't a huge celebration with the win. It was just we should have done that. We should have been doing this all season.
Yeah.
And of course now it's just showing how cutthroat this series is. They've gone. Their coach first, Ducky, he's gone. He was cut, and he left this team. He was replaced by Yamato Cannon, who's we know is he's a capable coach in his own right.
Yeah.
And we saw recently Ofal, who's been with them since they became Rockout. He's been moved positions. He's gone. He's been traded away from the team completely. Which I don't know. It's quite sad to see that team that was like such a together unit just like being complete like it was diced at the beginning. Saliva and you had Zazas. They were cut as well at the beginning of the season, and now it's like there are only 2 players from the original team left at the organisation, and it's quite. I don't know. Is that quite telling of how this scene has become?
Yeah, I think it's obviously it's become a lot more competitive. It's become a lot more professional. But I think what that leads to organisations that are formed around success. Because what it used to be was when you had old teams that just sort of formed, met each other on solo queue, formed, played a few seasons, and then suddenly made it pro.
Yeah.
You had that sense of these were 5 guys who'd come together. They weren't a part of a big organisation. They didn't have 3 different coaches, an analyst, and an owner. They were just 5 guys who were making it pro. And I think that has changed, and it is a lot more professional now, it's a lot more organised now. I think with that, there's a bigger expectation of this team will succeed, and if it doesn't succeed, people need to get cut, people need to be replaced until it does.
It's basically, if this team doesn't do what it's supposed to do, we'll find a team that will.
Yeah.
And it's not so much that team will stop sponsoring and move on, they'll just cut the players.
Yeah.
And I mean, obviously, it's been lucky for the Rockout guys who got cut because they've all found challenger teams that they're able to go to because they're in their own right, they're good players.
Yeah.
But the issue is that sometimes with players, that's not always going to be the case. And it's telling us people like Wicked still doesn't have a team that he can go to, even though I thought it would almost be, it was almost perfect because Wicked got cut from Elements and then Rockout cut their top laner. And I was like, surely that's. But it's not because. There's this guy, Steve, who's come in as their top laner. No one's ever heard of him at all.
Yep.
Like, he's come out of nowhere, and he's become this Rockout top laner. Rockout, a build, they're meant to be one of the big teams in this league.
Yeah.
They're not... Last year, I think they came in as a bit of underdogs. There was a Polish team, small Polish players, no one really heard them. They've known big names. But then in the summer, they shed off that cocoon of anonymity, and now they've got Nuke Duck, who's meant to be one of the best mid laners in this league. They've got Yankos, who proved that he was one of the best junglers. They've got Woolite, who was the rookie of the season last season.
Yeah.
And they've just, as a team, they've just combusted in on themselves. And I don't know if... What are we expecting from Rockout this season?
Well, I think it's a bit of a do or die season, isn't it?
Yeah.
Clearly, look, they can't have another season like they did last season where they end up getting to that point of relegation and then just acing it and thinking we should have been doing that all season. Because if you do that 2 seasons in a row, more throats are going to get cut.
And the thing is, how many throats are there left to be cut?
Well,
there's Vander and there's Yankos, and I know that the defeats, the losses in that game, that was not down to either of those players. Yankos had he had a very quiet season. He didn't do what he did. He wasn't being the first Blood King that he was made of last season.
Yeah.
And Vander, I don't think anyone could fault Vander for what he's doing. He was put with an inexperienced, almost rookie AD carry who's got a very different play style to what Saliva had.
Yeah.
So I don't think you can fault either of those players, which is probably why they're still around. But the question has to be laid is, are the team going to be willing to cut the big names that they've signed and start blaming them? Or are they going to start blaming these older players who are lesser known and are maybe more expendable to them as a commodity?
Well, certainly I think no one... Yeah, you can't rest on your laurels and see it sort of as, I'm this team's big player, I am safe. Obviously, I think Wicked would certainly have considered himself...
but was he the big player?
No, he wasn't the big player, obviously.
He's a big player.
But yeah, he'd been with the team, for a very long time. He'd been loyal. He'd stayed at that team for a very long time. He'd been a good player as well. He played out well.
Last series, he was very, very consistent. Which is one thing I always said about Wicked. He was never. He was a bit of a Dyrus in the EU. He was never the exceptional standout elements player, but he was always very consistent.
No, yeah, I mean, I think you can sort of epitomise Wicked in that back in when they had the All Stars game, when they did All Stars by region.
Yeah,
I think the fact that him and Soaz had such a close run for the top laner in EU spot shows that he actually, even though he wasn't always necessarily super exciting, super standout in the way that maybe Soaz was,
He was always
he was consistent, and everyone respected him. I think as a top laner, he wasn't an opponent who you would sort of go into lane thinking, okay, this is somebody I can push around. And let even him, one less than spectacular season,
and he's looking for a job, basically. I guess one of the only real positive you can take out of this is that Twitch has now become a viable platform for making a living, and I think a lot of these pro players could, and also like the backstage in these teams, like that has become a lot more valuable. Like,
so high.
And Nif as well. Nif, people don't realise that he's one of the coaches for Elements, and it's become a lot more acceptable for that to happen. But of course, you've seen with Ducky being cut as a coach, you're not safe there either.
No.
And I feel like it's much more like another sport. I was about to say actual sport, but that would have started a shitstorm. You've got like in football or rugby or whatever, you've got sometimes when teams fail, they blame the coaches. And I think coaches now that they've become a better thing, they're on the stage now at the beginning of matches.
Yeah.
You see them; they're now a face. They're not just like a name that you see on a card. They've become. They've also stepped into the firing line as well.
Yes.
So if your team doesn't perform for a season and you're not sure where the blame is going to turn, you've got to turn to the coach who's obviously not doing their job. And I think, I don't know, Yamato Cannon is certainly a bigger name than Ducky was. He was certainly he's a more flamboyant figure. I think he might be what Roccat needs at the moment.
Yeah.
But I think that's enough on Roccat for now. Let's talk about Fnatic for a bit.
Yeah.
Fnatic had a bit of, Reckless. He's back. He's back where he belongs on this Roccat team. Not Roccat, Fnatic team. I've got Roccat on my mind. It's interesting because I thought he had a fallout with the team, which is why he really wanted to leave. But now he's back.
Well, what it could be is, since then, obviously, Peke has left.
Could
that be, so
and whoever their jungler was has left.
Hercubot?
Maybe, I don't know. He's left. So the only player left on that Fnatic team is Yellowstar, and no one can't not like Yellowstar.
Oh, sorry, no, it's not Hercubot, it's Cyanide.
Cyanide's good as well. Cyanide? Who's Cyanide playing for? I don't know. But no, you can't not like Yellowstar. So maybe it was he left, he saw the team change and meld.
Yeah.
You've got 2 Korean players in top lane.
Yeah.
So there's not going to be any drama there because they're 2 Korean players. I know one of them, I think Kuni doesn't even speak English. So
Hooney's been very, very good.
He was rookie of the season. He's very good. Reyna has also shown that he can be very good.
Yeah.
And they've got Forbidden in the mid lane, who maybe one of the best new players on the scene at the moment. He's very good. He's not just consistent; he's outstanding week on week on week. But with Reckless coming back in, Reckless had a lackluster season with Alex.
Yes,
very much so. Will he improve? Now that he's back with Yellowstar, they played together last season, they know each other's, they know their dynamics. And will he perform better with this team that is arguably better than the Elements team that he's left?
I think he will, and my reason for saying that is that it's the 3rd season. So sort of when you come in as a rookie and you have an absolutely stellar season, suddenly all that pressure is on you. And you've got to go into the 2nd season, and you know it's going to be very difficult to perform at quite the same level. And if you add to that, the fact that the fact that people will expect you to do better in your 1st season because you're not a rookie anymore, you're expected to be consistent, you're not going to be able to make those occasional errors that people will attribute to you being a rookie. There's a lot more pressure, and so I think if you miss the bar by a little bit, you miss it by a lot.
Yeah.
Now that it's his 3rd season, he's not going to have that same pressure anymore. He didn't perform spectacularly last season, so he doesn't have to live up to that. I think he's back at Fnatic. He's going to be in a comfortable environment, and I think just that lack of pressure is going to allow him to.
I think he's really going to thrive under it.
Yeah, I think I'd expect.
I can see big things from Reckless this season.
Yeah.
If not, then maybe it's not the team, maybe it's the player. But I mean, I don't want to heap pressure onto Reckless as a player. I think he's a very concentrated player, as it were. I think that he's shed his image as kind of like the bellboy of League, as it were. I think that a lot of people are seeing him as he's not the Reckless. If I was if I was an esports like person, I wouldn't use Reckless as the face of my brand.
Yes.
Anymore. I definitely wouldn't do that. I don't think Reckless is the popular player. I don't think he's the fan favourite anymore. Certainly, he's walked off away from this team that supported him for his rookie season. He went to a team. Elements fans are not gonna be a fan of him now. He's just wandered off after a very lacklustre season, and he's gone crying back to Fnatic almost. And I think a lot of fans are going to be like, well, he's not my favourite player. But I think if he keeps his head down and just does his job properly, I think fans will start warming to him again.
Yeah, I think certainly there's a case for, he's got a lot of support to win back.
Yeah.
I think he can. If he has a good, consistent season, plays well.
And I think he's got the support. I think people are willing to like him if he just does this, and this, as it were.
Yeah.
But I think they're going to be good things. So I guess really now the last thing to talk about mainly is the SK Gambit scenario where Forgiven has gone from playing on SK to playing on Gambit, which that's quite a dangerous move for him, you would have thought, because he's gone from where he can be SK, who are like a quite stable team, they're quite secure, they did relatively well last season, doing the Gambit, which it's kind of a dangerous place to be at the moment, as it were, because maybe they're using Forgiven to plug a hole in their team, but I don't know if just one player is going to be able to plug a hole, which maybe is a whole team-wide issue, as it were.
Yeah, I think certainly Gambit are a team in trouble. I think they've had a hole in their lineup ever since Alex Ich left, and they've been since that they've been underperforming. They haven't been the team that they were, but while he was around. I mean, even while he was around, they were sort of in decline, and him leaving just made that worse. And in recent splits, they've struggled. They've been sort of towards the lower end of the table. They haven't had many big results, big wins. I think they're a team in decline, and so Forgiven moving to Gambit is a risk for him. I think certainly he will be the sort of shining light of the team. He will be the star of the team. People will expect him to be a leader on the Rift, as it were.
On the Rift and off the Rift.
Yeah, but it is a risk because if like you say, he's not enough. If one man isn't enough to fix a whole team's problem, which could very well be the case, then it could be a move that puts his career really takes his career off track. If he goes to Gambit and they then get relegated,
then you've got this really good player whose head's on the line for a team, and if that team doesn't perform, then his head will go with the rest of them.
Yeah.
But you gotta hope Gambit do well, if only for Forgiven's sake.
Yeah.
And the last 4 teams in the EU LCS, there's not been any changes, and then none of them are really. I don't know. There's not much to say about any of them. Like, you've got Unicorns of Love, who performed better than what everyone expected.
Yeah, they were a real surprise package.
Yeah, but I think I'm making my current prediction this season. They won't be the same. They won't. People have got used to them. They'll know what to expect from Unicorns of Love, and I think Unicorns of Love will have a hard split.
I think it can. Yeah, I think for teams like that, especially if you have a really dynamite first season, I think it can be hard to keep up that level of
momentum,
aggression. Yeah, that level of success, especially now that teams will be looking at them not so much as an underdog, but as someone who needs to be dealt with, someone who needs to be prepared against. They're going to be facing a lot more analysis. People are going to be dissecting their tactics more, and they're going to have to think up a lot of new strategies to keep themselves original, keep themselves fresh, keep themselves successful. And
then you've got H2K, which are similar to Unicorns of Love, and quite says they had a really good first season. But I think there was more expectation on H2K than there was on Unicorns, and they did well as well. Not as well as Unicorns, but they did. They had a strong season. They played very well. Over the entire season, they were consistent. They got good results. And they've, of course, like the last 4 days we were talking about, have the same roster. They're going in with the same group of players. Obviously, they had one change with Carson coming in as support for them. But I think they're going to do. I think these HK and Unicorns Law, I think they'll both have very consistent seasons. I think they'll become. I think these teams are going to become the phenomenon of the mid-table team.
Yeah.
I feel like they're going to become teams that you don't expect to be down at the bottom particularly, but you don't really expect them to be up there, challenging for worlds, as it were.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're going to start seeing.
I'd expect a consistent season from them, but nothing
amazing and nothing awful. Speaking of awful, Giants Gaming.
Yes.
I think a lot of people forgot about them. They managed to beat Reason Gaming in a 3-1 playoff, which they'll be quite pleased about. But I think Giants Gaming, I don't know if they'll survive this season. I think if one team's heads on the chopping block, it'll be Giants.
Yeah, I think they found it quite difficult to force their way into the LCS. They came in, struggled and had to play for their spot in the LCS. They did win. It wasn't a 3-0 like Rockout was. It was a 3-1. It wasn't as sort of comfortable as some of the other teams. I think it's difficult to come back from that. I think especially they'll be looking to have a strong start, have a strong first few games, because if they don't have that, the confidence is going to struggle. They're going to be wondering if it's going to be the same as their last season, and it's just going to be hard to get out of that sort of.
And definitely with Giants, especially, there's no meet your makers this season.
No,
there's no team to be below you. There's Oregon, who aren't going to be below them. Let's be honest. Rockout are going to be kicked into overdrive, so they're not going to be contention. So it's really, who else is there for relegation this season? And Giants are the obvious candidate.
Yep.
So I'm not expecting much from them this season. And the last team, of course, is the epic Wolves, the Copenhagen Wolves. I don't know what to expect from them. They're a bit of a yo-yo team. They'll have good weeks, they'll have bad weeks, and I think that lack of consistency has given them a kind of consistency within the standings.
Yes.
So they have good weeks, they have bad weeks, but they end up in the middle of the pack.
Yeah.
But it depends with MYM gone and Origin in, and the just overall improvement. Will that be enough to have them as a middle of the pack team?
I don't know. I think their inconsistency could cause them problems. I think it's all very well if you sort of perform every other week, but I think with that increase in the overall quality of the split that we should see it's
going to be harder to perform on those weeks that you're meant to perform.
Yeah.
So it's going to be harder for them to pick it up and to, I don't know, I wouldn't say survive. I don't think Copenhagen Wolves are in the same spot the Giants are.
No.
But I would say the Copenhagen Wolves are definitely...
They're going to have a harder season.
I think they're a bottom half team.
Yeah, I think, with the teams that have come in, Origin, we expect big things from them, and then obviously Rocket, having survived promotion, is going to have potential to do a lot better this season than they did last season, but we can't be sure. But I think certainly that's going to mean those teams are going to be battling harder than the teams, than the sort of bottom half teams were last season. And so I think for Copenhagen Wolves, who you'd only really back against the teams like Meet Your Makers or Giants, who really are struggling, it's going to be a harder season.
Okay, so now we've covered all teams. What I want to do is kind of do a bit of a prediction with you.
Okay.
Pick your brains. So we're going to go for first relegation. Which team do you think is going to get automatically relegated this season?
I think Giants look like the likely candidate.
Yeah.
Yeah, they just don't have that much.
I certainly agree. I think that one's quite a cut and dry prediction. I don't know. They might prove us all wrong. Nothing against Giants. I like them as a team. I like their play style. But I don't know if they'll be able to have what it takes to stay up. And which two teams do you reckon are going to be in the relegation playoffs? Like the ninth and the 8th and 9th team.
Relegation playoffs. I think Gambit could be down there.
Yeah.
I think if Forgiven flops a bit, I could definitely see Gambit being down there, and also potentially it's either going to be, I think, maybe Copenhagen Wolves or Rocket, depending on Rocket and how well they play, because I think Rocket are either going to have a season where they get back into form, where they are playing well again, playing well consistently again, or they're going to flop. And I think if they do flop, they will finish lower than Copenhagen Wolves. If not, they'll finish higher.
Yeah, I think Gambit certainly. If Forgiven doesn't, I don't think Forgiven is going to be enough of a band-aid to fix the gaping wound that is Gambit at the moment. And I think they could definitely be there. But I don't think that Rockout will be in that situation. I think Rockout are going to be a top half of the team this season. I think maybe maybe Unicorns. I think Unicorns have come off quite a hard. They didn't get through. They didn't win the playoffs, and I feel like now the teams know what they're facing against Unicorns. I think maybe Unicorns and Copenhagen will also be vying for that 8th, 7th spot. I think that's what it's going to be. But I don't know. I would say Copenhagen Wolves are probably slightly more likely to be in that relegation place than the Unicorns of Love. And maybe, I don't know, like, okay, which teams, what do you reckon the top half teams are going to be? So the top 5.
Top 5, I think Origin, I'd expect a good season from.
Yeah.
Fnatic, I'd expect a good season from. Yeah, they're just looking quite sharp all around the board.
Yeah.
Especially with bringing Reckless back, although that kind of depends on how Reckless does. So Origin, Fnatic, SK, I think could be in there.
Yeah, they've got Candy Panda instead of
the top 5.
Instead of Forgiven, but Candy Panda in his own right is a good AD carry.
Yeah,
so
and he's
that's 3 of them.
And then who else? See, I don't see Elements doing as well.
No, I don't see Elements being a top half team.
So I think H2K maybe in at 5th, and then I think maybe Unicorns are love at 4th. Ooh, that's what I think.
Controversial, I think. Origin, SK, Fnatic, obviously they'll be the 3 top ones. They'll be vying for 1st. But I think maybe Roccat might slip in to the top 5, and I think if they have the consistency that they've shown they can be consistent at, with the talent they've got, they should be in the top 5. And I think maybe H2K in the top 5 as well. I think they've shown what they've got, and because of maybe their lower finish than Unicorns of Love overall with the playoffs and whatnot, I feel like teams are going to be underestimating them more than Unicorns, and I feel like they could maybe sneak into the top half again. So what are we looking at for winning? Who's going to be top, Phil?
I don't think it's going to be Origin, because even though they have a star roster, I'm not sure whether they're ready to take top spot. I could be wrong. I think it could be Fnatic.
Yeah,
Fnatic look very strong this season.
I like the look of Fnatic as well. I think they've had the best movements of players so far, and I feel like if Reckless goes back to his old self with this team that have been built, I reckon Fnatic are easily, well, not easily, but I reckon they'll be the top team.
Yeah.
I think Origin and SK will both be up there vying for it. I think that about wraps it up for this first look at the EU LCS. We'll be doing, hopefully, post weekend coverage or post week coverage of the matches. And if you like listening to this or have any comments you want to throw out, throw them down in the comments. I do read them, good and bad. And I hope to see you again next Saturday for the first set of matches. Thank you very much for listening.